they graduate from university, or when they have the capability to help their own citizens within their own country. Most of them go there and they never come back. The reason for this is because in developed countries, most of the time they have higher wages and better working environments. And so this is why we think that today in status quo, if we don't implement the motion, these people are never going to come back. They're not even going to stay and work for a minimum amount of time. We say that under the current status quo, even if they have remittances that's coming back to from their country of origin, it's unreliable because this remittances is very unstable. We don't know how much these workers working abroad are going to remit back to their own country of origin. And also, it's very bad when one specific country is completely dependent on another country. Think of this, if all the African countries rely on remittances that come from workers that come from the United States, it's going to be very bad because in times of recession, there's no safety plan, and it's going to be worse off for developing countries. We think that proposition side today is going to try to make the entire country good in the long term. We think the debate is about collective good vs. Individual liberty, and we think that the collective good is actually more important than individual liberty in this case. Three things that we're going to tell you today in this debate. First of all, why it is justifiable for countries to bring these people back. And second of all, how even if these people studied in universities abroad, it's still justified to bring them back. Third of all, why it gives companies an incentive to enhance their working environments in developing countries. Before I move on to the 3 points, we have a model that we think that these workers should be able to work a minimum of 5 years within their country of origin, and after 5 years, they can choose to stay or not, and it's between their negotiations between the company and the workers. Moving on to our first point. We think that countries have invested resources in these people. The people who emigrate to developed countries are usually the people who receive the highest education, right? The IT firms, like the STEM workers, these high educational engineering workers, that we input a lot of money when we try to educate them in university. We give them research labs, we give them the best professionals within the country to teach them and to give them research projects and put much money in it. We think that because there is a limited amount of resource in developing countries, when you let one person into university, it means that you're already crowding out specific other people into university. So we think that we need to make sure that every single dollar that we spend on this individual is going to come back to society. If it doesn't come back to society, it means that this money just goes into the water and it's lost forever. It just goes to other countries, and we say that that's very bad. And we say that in this case, actually freedom of choice doesn't outweigh the responsibility you have for the country that invested in you in the first place. It's just the analogy of taxation, right? You have no choice of how much tax you have to pay because it's dependent on how much money you make, how much resource you extract from society. And so we think that in this case, the collective good is actually, collective goods for society is actually more important than your own liberty to choose if you want to go to which country, if you want to go work at other countries, etc. And second of all, we say that even if you don't study abroad, it's still justified for the government to bring you back and work for a minimum amount of time. So there are two reasons for this. First of all, the fact that these people can go abroad means that they're already kind of in the upper class already, right? Think of this. When you go to universities in America, it costs $2 million, Taiwan dollars. I don't know how to convert that. Sorry. But it costs a ton. So it's not like it's a generation, it's a wealth over generation. It's not like, oh, because you work super hard so you can go to Harvard. Without money, Harvard will still not take you. And so what we think is that the fact that you have this social status means that it's also the mandate of the government to take your resources and impose it onto the rest of the population. We say that this is also a form of extension of taxation, which is that the rich people or the more privileged people have the obligation to take care of the rest of the society. We think that the more privileged individuals should be able to help the more vulnerable. Thank you.
So most of these people come from Southeast Asian countries or Africa, right? So these people, even if they work for multinational companies, there's a considerable portion of people return as expats anyway. What's the justification of your premise to limit people's movement?
Wait, what was your question?
So these people come back as expats even though they work for multinational companies because it's a growing market. What's the premise to say that these people never come back?
Okay, so just think of this, right? In America, the working condition is so much better, and there's all these like smoke screen on the newspaper that says, oh, America has endless possibilities. You have no limits in America. What makes you think that they'll actually come back from an area that's so good? What actually happens in reality is that they actually also bring their family to the developed countries, which is even worse for the current developing countries. And this, we say that in the current status quo, people actually don't even come back. They leave the people back at home to rot. And this is why we can use examples of Africa. Like right now, because all the African doctors are leaving for developed countries, there are only more than 1,000 people only have 0.19 doctors. And we say that on side proposition, we say that what we offer to this debate is that these people can stay for a minimum amount of time, and they can contribute to new ideas within the research of their own country, about their own developed countries, and they can fight for their labor standards because they know their rights, because they're rightly educated. They know how to fight for it. It is a virtual cycle of the improvement of the economy, right? There's more employment, there's more social spending, there's an increase of disposable income. It brings up the entire economy in the long term because they contribute to like new ideas, new innovative projects, and they lead on certain issues on like innovation on technology. But the third layer is that it actually incentivizes companies to enhance their working environments. So because these people have the chance to leave after 5 years, it actually incentivizes companies to better off their working environments, to let these people want to stay, right? They would want to try to make their conditions better compared to these developed countries, like because we think that even though conditions in foreign countries are like comparatively better, we think that most of the time they still face discrimination in foreign countries. So when companies domestically in the developing countries can make conditions better for their workers, it makes them want to stay, and it makes overall the industry a lot better. Very proud to propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for the speech. Now I would like to call upon the Leader of Opposition.
I'm going to answer two questions in my speech. One, which paradigm can make for better development in these countries? And secondly, even if their side of the house is better for development, should individual liberty be justifiable trade-off for development? Both my refutations are integrated in my speech. Firstly, on the point of whether or not it is better for development, we tell you that we think it is rather counterproductive to take this measure for the sake of development. Right? There's a couple of responses to the comment coming from the leader, from the Prime Minister. We don't really get the premise of why a couple of years within this nation is actually going to contribute to the development of the nation. There's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, we think even if these people are highly educated in foreign countries, when they come back, oftentimes they cannot utilize their knowledge because there's a severe lacking of things like resources to be able to use it for research or maybe like infrastructure that they can use. We think in that kind of context, even if they are good researchers, they're just going to waste a couple of years within the developing countries. We don't really think that is going to be beneficial for anyone. But furthermore, we think when these people work in these countries, they're probably going to be working in a very low wage, in a very bad working environment. This means that in comparison to the fact that these people are getting higher wages in other countries, now having the ability to maybe like invest back into their home countries, we see the amount of money that is going to be incoming to this nation is going to be lesser. I'm going to develop my point within my constructive. We see the first harm is that universities within developing nations, the quality of that is going to decrease. Note that they assume that all universities are run by tax money, but that is not the case, right? We think in the vast majority of cases, Western private corporations have a huge incentive in the status quo to invest a lot of money into top universities of developing nations, specifically because they know that a lot of people who are very, very talented can be a potential potential human resource for their own company. That is the reason why the countries like top universities in Asia has gotten so much investment, because they know that if they invest in those kind of in specific programs of researchers, the people that be able to go into their own company when they know that the only option that they have is for them to, even if you invest in the resources in the university, the only outcome that is going to come out is going to be the fact that they're going to stay in that country. We don't think they're going to have a lot of incentive. But secondly, we tell you that it is much more beneficial for them to be able to utilize their knowledge overseas. Why is that? We think in developing countries it's very, very hard to be successful in an impactful way. We already told you that the amount of money that you're going to get is going to be comparatively small, which means that even if it only means that these people are going to be probably maybe in an impoverished situation and so forth. We think it is much better if they have the ability to have access to places like the US or countries where they can actually make money. Right? Why is this good? We think in the vast majority of cases, people who leave the country oftentimes have very close ties to their home country. This means that in many cases, they have family members still living in developing countries. They have cultural ties to that country, which means that they know that a lot of people in that country is suffering from poverty and so forth. In many cases, like people who graduate like in nursery school in the Philippines, oftentimes come to Japan. They make a lot of money comparatively to what they could make in the Philippines, and they send the money back to their families and so forth. This is good because the amount of money that is going to be extracted from other developed countries is going to be inflowing to developing nations. That money is now being used by their family members and so forth. We think this is generally good because firstly, these families can have a better living, but secondly, the money that they use is something that is coming from overseas, and it is going to be overall benefit for their own economy. So we think as an alternative, we support these people like working abroad and advancing in corporations. We think when they actually meaningfully advance in corporations, which is very, very important, they are now going to be able to select their home countries, maybe for investing in their own corporations or choosing it as a new market because they know that they can not now. And choosing it as their own market when they expand their corporations and so forth. I think these people, a lot of people who advance in big corporations also have the ability to do things like making scholarship funds for their home country or their own institution and so forth, which is what we are seeing in the status quo as rich people. But it's people who get higher education, who leave developing countries and make a living in places like the US and now advocating for the betterment of their homeland because now they have the political capital and the economic capital to actually advocate for change in a more meaningful way. We don't get that in their side of the house because we think a few years being wasted in a place where they cannot meaningfully do research or meaningfully advance their corporation or get experience means that they're going to be held back even a few years after, not now, if they actually want to leave the country again. Second point, even if you do not buy my argumentation on why development is going to be harmed, why is it still harmful and unjust to force individuals to stay against their will? We want to clearly point out that this debate is not only about the rich and the poor. Even within the rich, we need to recognize that developing nations are oftentimes very, very conservative and sometimes very some abusive environments for specific groups of people. We're talking about people like religious minorities or racial minorities or so forth, but especially note that rich people in developing countries oftentimes send their female children abroad for them to get higher education. We think this is a particularly important point because in many cases, developing nations oftentimes have a very conservative narrative that believes that women should not be able to work or women should not be able to hold research positions and so forth. Having an education as a woman, for example, in these developing nations oftentimes leads to nothing unless you go abroad. Right? In that kind of context, we think it's just principally unjust to force people who might be oppressed within these developing nations to stay in the country because they might have a benefit for their society. Right? As government, they have failed to protect a lot of minorities, a lot of racial minorities, religious minorities, and women or sexual minorities who are constantly being oppressed in that kind of nation. I think when they get the chance to leave, even regardless of whether they are rich or whether they are poor, if they get the chance to leave that oppression and can live in a country where maybe gay rights is being recognized, we think it is unjust for them to say that no, you have to stay and contribute to the society that has been constantly oppressing you. We think they need to justify this principle in order to win this debate. So overall, we think it is going to be rather counterproductive because the inflow of money is going to decrease. But secondly, we think even if that is not the case, there are specific cases that is unjust for them to force that individual to stay in an oppressive environment, and I think that is why we're moving this round.
Now I'd like to call
say I agree with 70% of analysis from leader opposition. I agree that people go abroad get a lot of opportunity. I agree people go abroad escape oppression. I agree that it's also true that people get higher salary, more opportunity, more research opportunity. And those are the reasons why we strongly oppose these analysis. Because those are the same reasons why people don't come back. And all the things that have been pointed out by leader opposition back actually kill their closing opposition anyway. Because what they have been telling us is the longer that you stay in developed countries, it means that you have more opportunity open up to you because you have more research done, you have more job opportunity open up for you in developed countries. That means the longer you stay in developed country, the trade-off for you to come back to developing country becomes heavier over time. So if you don't come back right after you graduate, you probably wouldn't come back anyway after like 3 to 5 years of working abroad already. So we want to pose this question to you before the deputy states their case. We question to you this frame that this debate is about collective good versus individual liberty. All they have pointed out so far is individual get benefit, but they never really clash with us on why the collective good is less important in this case. All they have pointed out is some flimsy analysis of the state is oppressive. I'll give you a few analyses. One, if we're talking about people who go to universities in Africa, which is closing options at context, not ours, or Southeast Asia, I don't know why. Sounds weird. South Asia is pretty big, but presumably we're talking about poor countries. So these are countries with huge gap between wealth, the huge gap between rich and poor. That means that people who go to university are probably the people who are not gonna be too oppressed anyway in those developing countries. And if they agree there is oppression going on in these poor countries, when these rich people leave the country, who is going to be there to fight for the poor people? So what we question is, when the rich individual get a safe way out of the country, who can actually fight for the labor rights in developing countries? It's only from our argument that you find the answer. It's when poor people and rich people work alongside each other. When rich people realize how great of a problem it is in the system, they need to fight for poor people's right. Because they need to spend 5 years for the rest of their life in the company. Because it's in their interest to improve the structure inside the corporation. They are the ones who have a voice, they are the ones who have the political leverage, they are the ones who has the knowledge to change the system. But when you let these people out of the country and they work in the United States, what they do is they contribute to the United States. We give you a knowledge of taxation, never responded by last side of the house. We gave you, right? Reason why we tax rich people higher is because they also benefit more resources from the society. And for people who are able to finish university, it's the same. Because there's a limited number of slots in university. And the purpose of university, unfortunately, isn't about making you as an individual better. It's about making the society better. That's why we have mandatory curriculum in society. That's why the state purposefully guarantee that you must learn certain subjects, because these are the subjects recognized by the state as good for society and it's good for general development in the future. Not because it's good for the individuals, but it's good because it's good for growth in productivity for the greater society. So the purpose of education is never really about individual. It's always about making society better. And to that end, we see the analysis from opposition is completely flawed because they never respond to the purpose of taxation, the purpose of education is to make the whole society better. And given that these people have been taking 20 to 18 years from the system, they've been benefiting from the whole system without paying tax. Maybe their parents did, but they personally didn't. Means that they have been sucking out state resources. Now, spending 5 years working in a company in their most productive years isn't too much of an ask. We think we could probably ask for more, but we are nice people, so 5 years is probably fine. And we believe after 5 years, company will have natural incentive to give them more benefit, and they will want to stay if they believe that this is a good environment for them, if they have believed that the structural changes have already been enough. We believe that all the positive materials that comes after that is why a company will become better after all, because the private market have incentive to compete against each other. Sit down. And we have this weird analysis from open opposition again. They say, wait, university quality is going to suck because private company won't invest in university anymore. No, actually, university will get even more funding because right now in developing countries, universities don't get funding because People just go to foreign universities, and even if they graduate from local university, they don't work locally. So local companies don't have incentive to invest in local universities. It's only under our side when developing countries get more funding to local universities in developing countries, because you guarantee that when university graduates, they will work locally in those countries. So if we're talking about quality of funding, so quality of university in terms of funding, we guarantee that on our side of the house. Before I move on.
So we challenge your concept of the purpose of education. Even when some portion of the purpose is social engineering, isn't it for like people's upward mobility and autonomy so that they can live happy?
No, your autonomy is less important than a collective good, because you are in a society where there's limited resources. You are actively depriving other people the job opportunity to go to university. The fact that you are not contributing to the country is a betrayal of the investment the state has put in you. Given that it's the limited resources we're talking about, we believe that there is a mandate from the state to demand more return from your participation. And then they will question us, right? If they eventually come back, then what's a big deal? Look, when do you actually come back is a big deal, because after you graduate, it's a creative period. This is where the period you have most intelligent ideas, you are most creative, and you are most physically fit to do long hours of work, to grind through the long night and writing research papers. Here's why we want to, that's exactly the precious period we want you to spend in the domestic context. If you come back to the original country, to country of origin, after 10 to 15 years, you probably come back all tired and you run out of creative ideas. Then what is exactly the point? Yeah, you might come back when you don't have any job offers in the overseas, but at that point, you are no longer productive workforce for the original country anyway. So we believe it's only when under our model that when we invest in education, we demand that it's returned to society, because it's a developing country. We want to development for the entire country, not just for individuals. Very proud to propose.
Sir, now I'd like to invite Deputy Leader of Opposition to the podium. Here's
So this debate comes down to two questions. The first is that about the extent of depriving individual rights. Note that they are not requiring those people who graduated in university to stay in developing countries entirely. That means they just require only 5 years. That means they already consider that to some extent individual rights are important. So we will examine to what extent we can deprive individual rights for the sake of collective good. And second is about even if we have justification to deprive individual rights, already again note that their premise of principle about depriving individual rights, about consequential argument that they can develop nations more in a better way. That means if we can prove that our side is much more better in developing countries, like we can win in this debate. Before that, one rebuttal to the DCM. So they said that like the quality of funding to universities or like accessibility to universities can be better achieved under the house for some reason that local corporations will start to have incentive to fund to go to local universities. Okay, just easy comparison. Under their world, it can be true that local corporations who are really weak and less sustainable might have incentive to fund to those local universities. Conversely, under our world, gigantic multinational corporations and strong developed countries have incentive to inject more money and open up more channel for exchange students and send more competent professors to those local universities, especially when those graduated universities from local universities can be like as soon sent to developed country as possible before waiting 5 years. Note that under their world, no matter what competent students graduated from those local universities in developing countries, those MNC or developed country cannot recruit those students as soon as possible. That means under our world, those MNCs in developed countries have much more greater incentive to inject money and they open up to exchange student professor. That means if we compare the power of local corporations and MNC in developed country, obviously our side is better. Why this is good? First, as they consider the educational resources extremely limited, that means if we can increase resources, it's obviously good. This is the consensus. Especially when this is kind of like open up channel for the more accessibility to universities, including middle class people. Under their world, only richest of the richest can go to university, while under our world, middle rich and middle class people can easily go to universities. That means this can also enhance economic development under our world, though I will explain later. That means in terms of accessibility in the scale of university, our side is better. So about justification. So the only sort of analysis, okay, before yes.
So what exactly is the point of having more education if education doesn't mean improving a society?
So this is actually this potential justification. We don't think that education is only about like improving collective good and collective society. Because like we already care the diversity and the individual liberties. Like we don't force every single individuals to be engineers or to be politicians or to be like those people to those jobs which can contribute to society. We already respect individuality or like of dream. Like you can just be literary like novelist or you can be just movie director, even when this cannot directly contribute to the social good. We don't think education is all about collective good. Then why we see this extent of just depriving individuality than just? The only analysis is that they are rich, they are upper class. That could be the reason to deprive financial right of those individuals by taxation as they consider. But we don't think this being rich could be the enough justification to deprive entire lifestyle choice of individuals, like the decision to where to reside, the decision of what kind of job are they going to have. Especially when Maria already explained that, later please. The problem of poverty or problem of problem of discrimination in developing countries is not only about rich versus poor. If the female children are born in the rich family, it's likely that even though they are rich, they cannot be granted the real standard of life in developing countries. It's very important for them to move away from those conservative society. Then the response from DPM is like who are going to fight against those discrimination. They didn't explain under their world, those female children born in rich family are going to fight back against those discrimination. Just because they're living in for 5 years, you can just wait 5 years and move to those developed countries. Anyway, we cannot solve discrimination even under their house. But comparatively under our world, when those female competent workers can be prestigious in the multinational corporations in developed countries, this can increase the presence, this can increase the international voice, this can more better pressurize those discriminatory structure of the government rather than like 5-year internal structure for some reasons. Therefore, we say even if we care discrimination and the right of individuals, our side is better, no more. Then, even if we say, even if this extent of just depriving right could be justified, then the question is which side is better for economy. We have to consider the characterization of people who are required to work 5 years under their work. We say, as they consider they have massive incentive to move away from the developing countries, then anyway after 5 years they will go to other countries. This is problematic for several reasons. First, this deprives the labor opportunity of less skilled people because those people who graduated university will stay for 5 years in developing country. This will obviously deprive the job opportunity of other people like relatively less skilled, like people who just graduated high school. This is quite problematic for several reasons. First, this obviously deprives the limited resource of labor resources and labor opportunity for the less skilled people the opportunity to earn money and get chance to increase labor skills, which could open up more future choices and more future dreams and more better QOA for those individuals. Note that those people who just reside 5 years can deprive important 5 years for other people's opportunity to get money and sustain their lives of families and children and individuals. They think this is simply problematic. Why those 5 years? Those poor people or middle people who just graduated high school have to suffer for poverty. Second, we say those people who will just stay 5 years don't care long-term sustainable development or bottom-up structure of those society. Not that they just said like they will fight for labor right. They will just fight for labor right of white collar that they will just ignore the blue collar workers or like agriculture or the people who are working in factory because they will just care that they type in PT or those kind of white collars. So especially if they are the people who just graduated from universities, then we don't think under their world they can ensure the labor right of every single individual. Then why we say outside is better for development? About remittance, only response is like economic recession could happen in developed countries. Obviously, economy in developed countries is much more stronger than developing countries. We say it's obviously good. Then about sustainability, those people just care 5 years. It could be possible that they will like destroy any kind of natural resources like forest or agricultural crops or soils because they just care 5 years development. While under our role, if those people who are just graduated high school care longer years by like bottom-up structure of economy, they can sustainably develop those countries. We say even for the economy outside is better. For this we do have it.
Now I would like to invite a member of government to start.
most important problem for the immigrants for some social established people, or those who can learn in the universities to the developed countries is that those who are elected in the developing countries can't get can't have a good infrastructure or environment to run something. We think opening the question trying to say like those who are oppressed in the society, and for example, females who cannot go and who cannot run in the university or so forth. However, we think the valuable proof of opening opportunities that why they are not responsible for those who are left in the developing countries and pay tax for the government to deliver their knowledge or the abilities that are getting by the universities in the developed countries that they can go by the tax or some support from their parents or some surrounding environment. Right? We think those who are in the developing countries rarely suffering from the poverty is the most vulnerable actors, and government should protect. In this perspective, I'd like to extend the derivative to two extensions. Firstly, the immigration of the social established people in the developing countries to the developed countries is one of the home of the exploitation of such kind of socially established people to those who cannot go to the universities, which is very because of some poverty or so forth. And secondly, why we have the justification to bind these kinds of citizens, those social established people to our own countries to several periods of the times. So no thank you. Later, please. We think in the reason why they can go to the universities and run high levels of education is that the huge amount is that their surrounding environment, right? That their parents maybe go to the university and recognize the importance of the education, and they are able to invest to their children's education. For example, pay for the cram schools, or they can support for their children to go to good private schools to so that in order to that they can go to good universities or so forth, right? And also after they enter universities, the government pays a lot of tax to those kind of people from the tax that are getting by that are got by every citizen in the society, right? We think the tax the important thing is that this tax is also gathered from those who are suffering from poverty inside the developing countries, right? So we think this is one of the form of the exploitation because after they graduate the schools, they can go to the developing countries. They can enter the good infrastructure or the good environment and high salaries. They can live comfortably in the developing countries, right? However, on the other hand, those who are left in the developing countries, they rarely have really bad infrastructure or some, and also they just pay the tax for the government from their very small amount of salary, and this to enable those who are established people so that they can live comfortably in the developing countries, developed countries. Right? This is really problematic because the government, one of the important role of the government is to mitigate the gap between those social established people and also the class. So before moving to my argument.
When you try to introduce a conscription type of limitation of personal rights, you have to prove the exclusivity in the way in which the service has to be delivered, which your bench hasn't done yet.
Yeah, this is actually my next point. Right? So after taking this from how we can mitigate these kinds of gaps and sort of exploitation. Right? So we think after taking this one, those who can get some knowledge or the high technologies in the universities can have the opportunity to deliver their knowledge or some technologies to those who are to support those who can get those who are located in the developing countries, right? For example, in the companies, they have to, after they graduate, they have to work in the companies inside the developing countries several years. Right? So we think in such situations, they have to deliver to their subordinate who does to go graduate from universities, and for example, some of their knowledge or the abilities that they can get in the university, right? For example, some semiconductor chip which is used in the smartphone. Also, this kind of how to make these kinds of things is delivered to those who are subordinate of them, right? So we think this is a really important process because they distribute to their resources to those to poor, right? So we think that this is a very good way to solve the exploitation of the socially established people to those who summarize unprivileged people, right? We think that go to my final argument. Sorry, and also we can, as the government side said, continuously said, we can achieve in long term the good economic growth of the developing countries, and this growing up of the economy can increase the government capacity and we can achieve social welfare more bigger and bigger, right? In such situation, of course, we can subsidize those who can subsidize to first so that they can go to the university and get high level of the education or so. We think this is very important. And also we think most important government role is especially for the government of the developing countries to mitigate the gap between the socially established people and the poor, right? So there is many people who are suffering from the poverty and even they eager to learn high level education because of the environment they can do. We think most vulnerable people is these kind of people, and government should protect. That's why we propose.
Thank you, member of government, for that speech. Now I'd like to invite the member of opposition to the podium here.
Unfortunately, this debate is not about collective good versus individual rights, because collective good that they're trying to protect is not, it's counterproductive to try to force people who really want to stick, who really want to go overseas to, their premise is wrong, and I'm here to prove that. So that's my first assumption. Second of all, I would like to talk about the principal justification protecting the freedom of movement of university-educated citizens who really, really, really want to go overseas. And so I'd like to narrow down the scope to really analyze the kind of people that are most relevant to this debate and motion. So, yeah, I think all my revolves are integrated. So, okay. So moving on to my first point. So, why forcing university-educated individuals to work after graduation is counterproductive to the development of developing countries? So I have three analyses. So first of all, we think that the scope of time of right after graduation is very bad. So 5 years after graduation is when you are learning how to work, when you are still at the stage of learning what it is to earn money or to become an expert in whatever field or the narrow subject that you choose to be in. And furthermore, you don't get much to do anyway because you are at the bottom rung of the company and you have managers and bosses who are telling you what to do. You don't have freedom to do the innovative things that the government side is talking about. You only have 5 years to achieve this in, and you don't have good people who will teach you anyways. And furthermore, we think that it's really, really bad because especially the first 5 years is when you have the lowest salary in the company. It's the entry salary and you really, so what this means is it creates a situation in which people who really, really want to go abroad will compare the salary that they can get after 5 years of experience with the current salary that they have in their developing countries, with the salary of developed countries. So it creates further incentive for them to go outside of the country after 5 years. And we think that it's especially difficult for people from companies in developing countries which are doing relatively not as well as the companies in big developed countries to be hired in companies like Google, Facebook, and so on, where like super good companies, leader companies in the world. But those people who are able to exit after 5 years of working are the most talented and probably exactly the kind of people that the government side does not want to lose from the developing countries. So what this means is that, okay, so some people, we will assume that some people who can't go outside, some people who won't go outside, will stay in the country and continue to work in whatever company or government place that they are in. However, because the most talented people with innovative ideas and perhaps patents and technologies that they are able to somehow develop in the limited infrastructure that they have, these people will exit and these people will go outside and they won't be able to stay to educate the less privileged people. They won't be able to, they won't be able to educate the university educated students who come after them. So we think that it's very counterproductive when you create such incentive for people who really, really want to go outside. Second analysis, it's rather better to spread talented people in different parts of the world. Why? Because we think that if the developing countries really want to compete economically with other developed nations, we think that it's very important for these companies to have contacts outside of their own countries. So it's rather better to have talented people who know the local networks, who know the local market, in order for those companies from developing countries to be able to spread and to be able to sell whatever products or whatever services that they have in other countries. No, thank you. We think that it's far more likely that these individuals have ties with leaders if they can continue. For example, these people have decided to study abroad and they have graduated from a foreign university. And they already have friends, and they already have some contacts and networks in the markets that they want to know, in the markets that they want to go to. So in that situation, it's rather better to not shut down that relationship, but rather to let them to continue and build on the relationship and social capital that they have in order for companies from developing countries to be able to contact these people and to rely on them as points of references and as people who will introduce them to new things. And thirdly, what this means is that this undermines the premise that this debate is about collective good versus individual liberty. But because for these particular individuals, it's paramount that most knowledgeable, and they're the ones who are able to help the countries grow. We agree with the government side that these are exactly the kind of individuals who will help the country. And that is exactly why we need to allow them to be able to freely move around and to contribute at whatever times that they want to do. So, before, yes.
So you seem to agree that going out is bad. That happened on your side. You have addressed that. But according to your own analysis, that for the first 5 years is a shit job. So if first 5 years is just spent in the United States, what's the point of having this contact?
Because they are able to continue the friendship. And I think even in this type of technology, physical distance can survey your friendships and partnership, whatever. Okay, moving on. So my second point about what is the principal justification for protecting the freedom movement of university-educated citizens who want to work overseas. So let's look at what kind of people they are exactly. So they are rich, smart, and they are elites. They are brought up as leaders. They know the history of colonization that happened in their countries, and if they want to be politicians or government officials, they can't be that in foreign countries, so they will stay anyways. So a certain portion of the population will be political leaders in the country anyways. But they decide to go overseas, and yes, they talked about how these are privileged people, but maybe in certain aspects of their identity, such as their sexuality or religion, in certain intersections of their identity, they are not privileged and they are likely to be oppressed. And they may be asylum seekers who want to be educated and who want to continue to work in the foreign countries. And they have a very strong reason not to come back. And let's go back to the purpose of university education. We learn to think independently, to think independently, and this is the top 1% of the world that goes to uni, a very low percentage, people who are able to make very educated decision making. These people are choosing not to go outside. Why would they want to go, or why would you want to force them to stay in such conscription style, forcing them to stay? They're not responsible, they're from former colonized countries, it's not their responsibility to help their country if they choose to do so. For these reasons, we beg to oppose. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Government Whip.
So as the opening comment has mentioned, this debate is about individualism versus collectivism, right? But what kind of collectivism are we talking about here? Point about nationality, like not in other groups such as gender or ethnic minorities, right? So in my speech, I could prove why we can solve, why on the outside of the world we have much less economical gap from the point of view from nationalistic identity, and secondly from the why we have less oppression of minorities, and why our extension we have put in the best actor to protect as a point of view from the government, right? So on the first point of the economical, and I'll be integrating my other in a way. Okay. Firstly, from the point of the individualism versus collectivism from the economical perspective. So firstly, the closing opposition has said that it is not the responsibilities, right? However, it is the responsibilities. So why is it? So who's suffering in a status quo, right? The vulnerable one, who doesn't get to go to universities, right? And still has to pay the taxes so that rich people can go to universities, right? And we believe that when rich people come, and people who go to university come back, or maybe come back and maybe help out the country, it's okay, right? And it's okay, right? But as long as they're getting paid taxes, we believe that these kind of people who go to university has responsibilities, right? Because that's the reason why they get to go to university in the first place, right? And that's the whole point of, for example, other systems like social welfare systems and taxation systems, right? And in other words, when this kind of an exploitation from the poor happens, what do these kind of people who get to go to university must do, right? They have to help out, for example, infrastructure and medical, and or possibly make a better education so that these people in poor can go to universities, right? And we believe that from that perspective, outside is much more better, right? Why is it? Well, simply the opening government has mentioned that the good analysis of why these people would not have an incentive to come back. And simply the opening commission has mentioned why these people who are talented to come back and do it. But they have never mentioned the incentive or why it makes them do it at the point of nationalism, right? Because simply, it's mentioned the example of, for example, China, right? So lots of people back in the 1960s went to, for example, United States, for example, to get a good skills, right? But what happened afterwards, right? Because they didn't have the incentive from the protect, for example, they only had an incentive for example, make them as a to better company, like to help out the family. They never had the incentive to help out a country as a whole, right? So what happened, right? So because they want to make their company better or make their family better, they simply have exported to the poor in kind of countries, right? This is why the status quo in, for example, in China, there exists a clear gap between the people who live in, for example, Shanghai, or people who live in much more poverty area. Yes.
So those people who immigrated and made success in the US are the exact people who stopped investment in China in the time of economic burst.
Okay, yeah, yes, but I say that they make a better investment. They might raise GDP as a whole. However, they don't have incentive to help out the poor, right? Because simply their only incentive is to help out the company and these individuals or families, right? Not as a country as a whole, right? And compared to this, what do we get? We have Japan, right? Or maybe the whole point why Japanese people didn't go to outside back in like 1940s was because they cannot speak English. But just because they stayed within the country, two benefits from this. Firstly, they never had the opportunity to do exploitation among these poor people, right? Simply because they had tend to stay in the country much more longer, they tend to have much more thing of nationalistic feeling going on, and secondly, they were never really capable of doing exploitation because they didn't have the support from these big companies from the Western countries, right? So from that perspective, we believe that outside is much more better, simply because comparatively, they might do exploitation later on. However, at least in those 5 years, we will never have this exploitation. And if not, we can solve the problem of that, right? So from that point of view, from the economic perspective, outside is better. Secondly, the operation of minorities, right? So the opening opposition has mentioned that and the closing opposition also has mentioned that they have to get out of the country, right? To not get oppressed and settled on, right? Simply 2 points on this. Firstly, the opening government has mentioned a good rebuttal to them that they're not the actor and simply will not change because the core of the problem will not fix, right? And we have to mention that this kind of oppression will be fixed better on our side of the world, right? To explain this, what is the place of university, right? So university is a system which is created by the Western cultures, right? So it tends to have much more legalistic thing going on, right? So what happens when these people get outside, right? Simply because they don't want to get oppressed, they'll never come back. But if we make them stay at least for 5 years, they might have an incentive to actually make a country a better place from what they have learned in these universities, right? So from that point of view, I'd like to say that this oppression of minorities would be comparatively better off on our side of the houses, right? And lastly, I'd like to mention why we, the closing government, has mentioned the best actor to protect, right? Well, the opening government has mentioned a clear good stance on like individuals and collectivism, right? But we on the closing government is the only team which made much more detail about who as a collectivism, what actually collectivism is, which kind of people are we trying to protect from the point of view from collectivism, right? So we have made a better analysis from that point of view, more specific one. And compared to this, the entire opposition bench has mentioned harms from these individuals will not be able to get their rights to go outside, right? But let's look at this, right? Because simply, these actors who gets to go outside has been benefited from these poor people, right? Because they simply has an exploitation, right? Because so if you want, so these people are able to go to university because of these poor people, right? So we believe that these people have the responsibility to stay inside the country to help them out. And secondly, we say And secondly, we say that because these people actually are capable of doing so, they should be the one who's doing it. And sometimes it is justifiable to keep them in the country as a point of view from collective nationalistic ideas, so that we can help the country as a whole in as well as long term, right? So from that point of view, I have to mention that we have won today's debate. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite the last speaker of this round, here.
Honorable adjudicators, ladies and gentlemen, the government bench seems to misunderstand the relation between people and society. People do not exist for society, but society does exist for people to give them merit. And to the extent that society is beneficial for individuals, reciprocity happens. We think, especially when the gravity of the limitation of rights is considerable, we have to be especially cautious on how and why people should give back to society. And that's the stance coming from opposition bench. I'm going to engage in two issues to sum up this debate. First, I'm going to engage with the issue of the necessity and efficacy of this policy, which is the consequential premise of their argumentation, and give you different development scenarios and prove to you that what they're talking about as an exclusive scenario as it is unlikely and at best speculative. Secondly, I'm going to engage with the distinction in the way in which personal rights could be limited, and prove to you why, even if contribution is important, why this particular form of conscription type of limitation of movement rights is unjustifiable. With that being said, I'm going to move on to the first issue. So the entire premise of government bench is that overarchingly most people who study in universities domestically and overseas, they don't come back to the company. I'm going to prove to you that this is false, and they have already contradicted themselves. Firstly, Prime Minister already told us that even people are looking for opportunities in the United States or other developed countries, there are already competition. And since a lot of people go to the US or Europe or like China, for example, there is harsh competition. So there would be, first, people always lose out so that they have to look opportunities elsewhere, and that will be likely other developed countries or their own countries. So we don't really think that just because there's opportunity, people would automatically go there and stay there. Second response is also against the Prime Minister's point. She already conceded and admitted that there is harsh racial discrimination in developed countries, and people feel uncomfortable living there. So the also likely scenario, meaning that a certain portion of people are willing to come back, is that they feel uncomfortable or be offended while working there, and they want to live in a more comfortable society. That is a personal, natural incentive for these people to already come back. Thirdly, we have to also take note to my partner's argument, saying that there are people who are concerned of their condition of their developing countries. That's why they come back. Second response I have here is that attacking their premise on developed countries being furthermore full of opportunities. We have to note that Africa and Southeast Asia are faster growing markets, and that's why people who learn abroad and become entrepreneurs come back. I'm going to give you two examples. For example, Rocket Internet from Germany, which is Amazon replica in Southeast Asia and Europe, they actually made their company there after learning in the US. Or Grab in Southeast Asia, they are also entrepreneurs coming back from the United States. And again, they have been extremely dismissive on the fact that emerging markets are growing faster than developing countries. So if business persons are looking for opportunity, they also have a natural incentive to come back. Third response is on expats. Even if they work for Coca-Cola, for example, not yet, or GE, Amazon, Google, whatever, Baidu, whatever, these companies need local representatives for them to operate in the market. That's why they hire people from other countries and send them as expats. No, thank you. So even without this policy, we believe that there would be a natural economical or personal incentive for these to come back and contribute to the economy. Secondly, furthermore, I'm going to attack the efficacy of their policy. So they have told us already in an opening government speech that developing country corporations have an incentive to hire these people by bettering the working condition of their countries. like, we don't think this was a contentious argument, because if they tried to hire highly talented people who worked in Google, they anyway like headhunt them by paying them large salaries. So we don't really think that this policy itself is necessary to limit the movement, because companies can pay a lot of money. So that was also a concession coming from their side. Not yet, sorry. So this is why my partner's extension is especially shining, because she has told you and proved to you that experience in Google, Amazon, and Baidu in the first part of these people's career is very, very important, because keeping inexperienced people in a professional sense in the country does not really make that contribution. We have to actually export these people to be able to work for Google or Amazon, and then headhunt them to come back through a natural incentive. That's why this policy that they're proposing on their side of the house is not necessary to begin with and not effective. That's why this falls. Secondly, moving on to the ways in which,
So all three speakers before you say the developing countries are oppressive. Now all of a sudden you are saying Southeast Asian country is booming. So if it's so booming, so why is so all of a sudden detrimental for them to stay?
Yeah, okay. Response to that is your comment in the Deputy Prime Minister's speech. Southeast Asia, there are a lot of countries, and there are like many different people. People may want to flee from an oppressed regime in, let's say, former Cambodia, or they still want to go to Indonesia. We don't really think that's contradictory statement. Secondly, moving on to the distinction in the way in which personal rights could be limited. So basically, as I have raised in my POI, they constrict people to limit their movements and contribute to the society in the form of labor. We think this is problematic when it's operationalized, because they haven't proved to you an important premise. The premise are twofold. Number one, the exclusivity in the way in which the service has to be delivered, because both sides are okay with taxation, including taxing overseas assets, so that the money that these people earn can come back to the original country. So why the form of labor is such important. Second is the direct responsibility of the people, because we have to know that people being poor and suffering on the ground is regrettable, but still this is a value-neutral rhetoric. So I'm going to move on. Number one, exclusivity in the way in which. So the reason why, ladies and gentlemen, conscription is justified is because it is the only exclusive way for the military to operate, to have a human capital. That's why we have to constrict people to deliver certain type of form of labor to stay in the military. But for other things, like building infrastructure or giving education, taxation is okay. And the government draws the line there. If people contribute in some form of the way, if it's not if certain type of form of labor is not explicitly necessary, taxation is the usual option that governments take. That's why we don't really think that they haven't proved to you the exclusive benefit of their scenario. We don't think they have proven this important premise. Second, responsibility. Again, we have to note that it is a value-neutral rhetoric that these poor people are suffering in the developing nation. Also, these people trying to fly to other countries only happen to born in that country based on birth lottery. If the context of developing countries is former colonized countries, developed countries are also or more responsible for that. So we don't really think why their side of the house can unfairly push the burden to people who are less responsible for the causation of such kind of poor people suffering. We also don't think that they have proven to the important premise. For all those reasons, ladies and gentlemen, we're so proud to host. Thank you.